I started to fall in love with my wife when I saw her in a swimming pool. We were both in Hawaii and I was working at a film school. We lived in the same apartment complex and used the same pool. I had met her about 6 months prior and nothing had attracted us to each other. She was convinced that I was European because I was wearing Japanese shoes, Onitsuka Tigers, like the ones the bride wears in Kill Bill. I'm from Arkansas. I thought she was someone who would die if she ever had to spend time by herself. She loved being around people and was in the middle of a social circle that included my roommates and seemed to involve a lot of time spent at bad chain restaurants and flirting. But here she was at a swimming pool and apparently totally at ease and happy to be by herself. It didn't add up. A few nights later, we ran into each other at the pool and had our first real conversation without anyone else being around. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys. Coincidentally, they all went to Greece about a week later for a month. And just after they got back, Sarah and I were engaged. We got married in Pennsylvania 6 months later. Our parents met for the first time at the rehearsal dinner. We moved to Prince Edward Island because that was where Sarah's parents had relocated to and where she had some commitments. I've been in Hawaii for over a year, and I was tired of consistently beautiful weather. Over the next 6 years, we had 3 kids. We started taking them on road trips to visit my family in Kansas or to explore parts of North America we were interested in. We homeschooled, and we traveled around from place to place. We had adventures, and we loved it. The winters in Prince Edward Island are cold and long, and when we left, we didn't feel like we were missing anything. I'd started a video production company and figured I could manage projects and edit from the road. So in mid-December of 2015, we packed up our apartment and hit the road for a planned trip of 5 months. Earlier in 2015, Sarah and I had started watching a popular YouTuber named Casey Neistat who keeps a daily vlog. Each night we would watch the latest episode of his vlog.
Liquid sleep.
I documented some of our winter trip the year before, and we thought we'd do it properly this time. Shoot video throughout the day, every day, and upload a daily vlog to YouTube. We started doing it before we left, documenting the move and shooting things around our neighborhood. Then we took off. My parents live in Kansas, and we tried to alternate between being with them and with Sarah's parents each Christmas. We drove straight there. It took us 5 days. The previous year we were on the road for 5 months, and the plan this year was similar. Stay south of the snow, have adventures, and just maybe get all the way across the country. We got to Kansas for Christmas with my side of the family. My parents had moved to Lawrence a few years ago from Kansas City. Lawrence's main feature is the University of Kansas, which sits on Mount Oread and overlooks the plains for miles in every direction. We stayed through the new year and into January. I had a nagging feeling, like I needed to go visit my grandmother in Tennessee. She'd been suffering from Alzheimer's for several years, and I tried to see her at every opportunity. The day after I visited her, she passed away. We'd already booked a stay in New Orleans, and we drove down and then back up to Memphis for the funeral the following week. At the funeral, the boys didn't want to look in the casket and stayed in the hallway, playing chess during the small service. Ren, our most daring and morbid child, had to be pried away from the coffin. It was cold that day in Memphis. The fountain at the funeral home was frozen. We headed for San Antonio, Texas, a city we keep visiting because I'm a Spurs fan, and also now because we really like it. It's a city with a complex cultural and political heritage. It's unassuming and laid back. We went to a Spurs game and got to shoot free throws on the court. We all missed. After a week there, we moved up the highway to Austin. We've been to Austin a number of times before. It's a city that's growing faster than it should be. Skyscrapers are growing like sunflowers. Traffic downtown is terrible. One day we were sitting in traffic for an hour and a half. At one point it took us 40 minutes just to travel 2 city blocks. But it's a city with a vibrant arts community and one we could see ourselves living in someday. We spent a month there. We visited the LBJ Presidential Library and almost all the major museums in the city. We swam outdoors in February. Then, more or less on a whim, Sarah suggested we go to Albuquerque, somewhere that I'd only ever been briefly. We stopped in Marfa, Texas along the way because I was intrigued by its movie history. Things like Giant, and more recently, No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood, had scenes shot in the town. We didn't find that much to do there besides look at the buildings. We passed through El Paso and marveled at how close downtown Juarez and downtown El Paso actually are. I had no idea so many residents of Juarez could just look up and see America almost an arm's length away. In Albuquerque, we immediately fell in love with the adobe architecture. I'd expected there would be a mixture of adobe buildings with more generic construction, but almost everything there is made of adobe. Route 66 ran right by our house, and there were abandoned motor inns all along it, in both directions. On our first weekend there, we headed down to White Sands, New Mexico, which is in the south. It was a place I visited as a teen on a road trip to Arizona, and I really wanted the kids to see it. We knew it was windy that day, but had no idea what that would mean when we arrived in White Sands. The whole park was engulfed in a cloud of blowing sand that blocked out most of the light from the sun. Incredibly, the park was still open, and we drove in and tried to enjoy it, but pretty quickly we just got worried about how much sand we were breathing in. You could feel it going into our lungs. The sand there's like powdered sugar. It's fine and white and crunchy when you squeeze it in your hand. So we drove back up. New Mexico is dotted with volcanoes, which totally surprised us. On Easter, my sister and her family met us in Albuquerque, and we drove to a house west of Flagstaff to spend a few days visiting sites in Arizona. We visited the Grand Canyon on another windy day, and found it really hard to look at the canyon without being paralyzed with fear for the scores of people who were standing right at the edge of the canyon to take pictures of themselves. We were just sure we were going to see someone fall in. We visited Sedona, Arizona on a snowy day in Flagstaff. Sedona is thousands of feet below Flagstaff, but less than an hour away. And by the time you finish descending into the city, you're ready to take off your winter coat and go around in a t-shirt. It might be the most beautiful place we visited on our trip. It's really hard to single out just one place that's the most beautiful, but Sedona feels dreamed up. So many amazing rock formations don't belong so close together. The next day we were going to the Grand Canyon again until we tried starting our car. It was dead. We tried to go to the Grand Canyon, but our car wouldn't start this morning, and no amount of encouraging could summon it back to life. We were stuck for a day and then got it towed very expensively into Flagstaff to have the starter replaced. We were faced with a decision: continue on west or start heading back east. We decided to go west, but by the time we hit Phoenix, we were having starter trouble again. Caspian was also running a fever. We made it to the California border and then we stopped. There was nothing there. Just the desert, a hotel with mirrored windows, and a truck stop. Phoenix and Palm Springs were about the same distance away. The car was scratching and grinding and rattling when we turned the key. We got it started and white-knuckled it into Palm Springs and got the starter replaced a second time. And then there was really nothing left to do but go on to the coast. We drove to Oceanside, California, and went straight to the beach. California. Sarah and I immediately felt at home, which was weird. We didn't expect to feel that way. The next day, we reluctantly turned east and drove to Las Vegas. We took our kids down to the Strip to see the fountains at the Bellagio, something I wanted to do when I was there years before, but I'd never pulled off. We were surprised by how easy it is to park downtown at street level. Our car top carrier generally keeps us out of parking garages, but the casinos have these huge open parking lots. The next few days, we wove our way through Utah and Colorado. It might be the most jaw-dropping stretch of the trip. Utah was beautiful, but it was a different kind of beautiful every 30 minutes. Highway 70 weaves through cracks in the mountains and skirts around barren red plains, dotted with alien rock formations. In Colorado, we drove to the top of a mountain in Snowmass, overlooking a frozen lake, and went for a hike in the snow in our shorts. Our feet caved in through the melting snow, and the kids got snow in their boots, and all cried like they were going to die as we hiked back to the car.
Look at me. Keep going, Caspian, keep going. Keep going.
They lived. We drove back to Kansas and got some more bad news. Our car was on its last legs. We needed a new one. We've been trying to adopt for a few years, and we discussed getting a car with more than 5 seats for a while. As a matter of principle, I've always opposed a minivan. They aren't cool. They don't speak to who we are as people, to our taste or our values. Minivans are the vehicle for people who've settled. We got a minivan. After we purchased the minivan, we realized we couldn't return to Canada until we had the title for the car in hand.
No, you don't.
We'd planned to go back to Prince Edward Island in May. We went through Baltimore to see an Orioles game and Washington, D.C. to see museums, and then New York City on a rainy, gray day where the clouds obscured the top of the Empire State Building. We tried to take the kids wherever they asked us to go. Zan had said he wanted to see the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty. We went into the foyer of the Empire State Building, looked around, and we took the Staten Island Ferry past Lady Liberty. Both of those were free. I think the kids' favorite part of the trip, though, was riding the train to and from New Jersey. We visited Sarah's parents in a house they own in the Pennsylvania mountains. It's an old church that's over 100 years old, and it's probably the closest thing to home for our family, even though it's a place we could never live year-round. We waited there for the car title. It took a month to come. Because it was open-ended, I think it was the best time we've ever spent at the house. Days stretched on and on. We were waiting for something but had no control over when it came. We were just there, living, in a remote part of the country with our feet up on the railing of the porch, watching the creek go by.
It's every night, right, Mommy?
We did go back to New York for a day and explored somewhat aimlessly. A guy tried to get us to tip him for putting a pet snake on Ren's shoulders. We didn't have any cash.
Photos, guys. You got it?
Sorry, yeah.
We found out that climbing and sliding on the boulders in Central Park might be one of the city's best attractions, and one that's definitely not advertised. Finally, our car title came, and we scratched our plans to return to Prince Edward Island via Toronto and Quebec City. We just drove straight back up through Maine because we'd already rented an apartment that would be ready for us on June 1st. It wasn't. We moved in on June 7th. And now we're back in Charlottetown, going to parks, playing baseball, working, finishing up the school year. We've discussed moving other places, Toronto, New York City, but I think we'd have a hard time staying anywhere year-round. Being on the road is in our blood. We'll be here living relatively normal lives for the rest of the year. But when the year ends, we'll move out of our house and get going. Our kids have asked to see the Golden Gate Bridge and the Eiffel Tower, and we'll see what we can do.